Hey, what's up everyone? It's Emily and welcome back to my channel. So July is Pride Disability Month, if you didn't know that already, and it is celebrating its 32nd year since the ADA Act was signed into law in the United States, which basically prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities. Because of that, I wanted to rec everyone some books featuring disabled characters. I did a somewhat similar video last month where I recommended books with specifically neurodivergent characters. People who are neurodivergent are considered disabled, but this is also going to expand more into other capacities like physical disabilities and other mental disabilities. It is estimated that in the world, 1 billion people, or 15% of the population, is disabled. And being disabled doesn't just mean probably what everyone's thinking, where maybe someone is using a wheelchair. This expands to people with OCD, PTSD, autism, ADHD, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and honestly, I have very few books that I've read that have had disabled characters or disabled main characters. The only two I can think of off the top of my head are A Curse So Dark and Lonely and A Quiet Kind of Thunder. And I also just finished Gallant. But I'm not going to talk about those books in this video. These are all going to be newer released books, and hopefully we will have a somewhat wide variety of disabilities being talked about. Just a disclaimer, I have not read any of these books, but they sound absolutely wonderful and I'm adding them all to my TBR, and I hope that you find something interesting in this video and maybe you add something to your TBR as well. I'm going to put several links down below to many articles recommending even more books with disabled characters, and I hope that you find a new favorite book within this list. The first book I want to talk about is called One for All by Lily Lainoff. It is an own voices gender-bent retelling of The Three Musketeers. Our main character has a chronic illness, I believe it is POTS, and the author as well also has POTS. Our main character, Tanya's mom, is trying to marry her off, but she would much rather be in a sword fight than giving her hand in marriage to someone. And the entire town kind of writes her off as this sick girl who gets dizzy all the time. But her one dream in life is to be a musketeer like her father was, someone who's fierce, independent, strong. But then her father is brutally murdered, and his dying wish is for her to go off to school. And then she heads off to finishing school, where she meets a lot of other young women who are socialites and on the surface seem very frilly and, you know, rich and proper, but then underneath they are doing sword fights and kicking butt, amongst other things. So along with this newfound camaraderie and sisterhood, she uncovers a plot of an assassination, and she goes on an adventure to try and stop it. It sounds like there's a lot of adventure, romance, and some really great storytelling going on here, and this is one that I'm definitely excited for. The next book I want to talk about is called The Moth Girl by Heather Kalmans. Our main character, Anna, is just a regular, normal teenage girl when one day during track practice, she falls unconscious, but instead of falling down, she falls up. What she's diagnosed with is a fictional chronic illness, and this story kind of revolves around her learning how to cope with a chronic illness. So we navigate a lot of the way her relationships change with the people around her, her friends, her family, herself even, and how having this illness kind of changes the way her entire life works. So it's not based on a real illness necessarily, it's definitely fictionalized. She apparently has manifestations of other things like craving sugar, being attracted to light sources, lots of other things that happen with moths, which is obviously where the name comes from. So I kind of think that it's an interesting little twist to have something that's kind of magical and otherworldly, but still grounded in a very real place, in a way of showing what people who have chronic illnesses deal with every single day. So this one sounds really interesting. It's also this author's debut, so I'm really excited to see how this works out for her. The next book I want to talk about is The Whispering Dark by the author Kelly Andrew. This book is coming out this year in October. It is described as The Raven Boys meets The Ninth House in this kind of dark academia novel featuring a deaf protagonist. It also sounds like she has some sort of connection to the afterlife and some sort of necromancy skills. There's a boy that we meet named Colton that she apparently brought back to life after he died when they were little, and they meet again at this college that she goes to. They don't really like each other and they're kind of told to stay away from each other, but as a lot of these stories do, they are forced to team up together against a bigger evil that's happening on campus. So this sounds like a really fun, dark, interesting novel and perfect for October, so I can't wait for when this one comes out because I definitely will be putting this one towards the top of my list. The next one I want to talk about is called You, Me, and Our Heartstrings by Melissa C. And this is a contemporary YA romance. It's kind of giving me enemies to lovers, but not quite enemies, just kind of unlikely people falling in love, I suppose. We have two musicians who are both prodigies trying to get into Juilliard. One of our protagonists, Daisy, has cerebral palsy, and Noah, our other protagonist, has anxiety. And they are asked to perform a duet to get into Juilliard. At first, they aren't sure how well it's going to work out, but when they do a wonderful job and they go viral, things kind of get out of hand. The book deals a lot with people only seeing Daisy for her disability and how the country kind of falls in love with them together, and they say that, oh, she's so strong for overcoming her disability, and he is just a saint and a perfect person because he can see beyond that. And, how that relates to society and how people see people with disabilities. And then on top of that, all of this media coverage is worsening Noah's anxiety as well. So this sounds like a really wonderful romance that hopefully has some awesome storytelling, and I am really excited for when this one comes out. The next book I want to talk about is called All the Right Reasons by Bethany Mangle. And this is a contemporary adult romance where The Bachelor meets Gilmore Girls. Now, I haven't seen either of those shows, but I read the description of this one and it sounded very cute and interesting. And the long and short of it is Kara, our main character's mom, goes on a single mom's show and the daughter falls in love with one of the contestants' sons. It takes place down in Key West, so very much like, it sounds like a vacation read in a lot of ways, like a great place to read on the beach. And our love interest, Connor, has Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is really awesome because I have never seen Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Sorry, that is really hard for me to say. I've never seen that in a novel before at all. So I really hope it's good. I've never seen The Bachelor or Gilmore Girls, so honestly, take that for what it is. It's probably going to be very good for a very specific subset of people, but it's supposed to be quite funny, and I'm interested in reading it. Next book I want to talk about is called Tiara in the Dark by Maya Chiavra. Our main character, Tiara, comes from an Indian-Italian immigrant family, and she is hopefully soon off to the ice skating summer camp of her dreams. But Tiara is dealing with OCD and starts having lots of intrusive and bad thoughts, and she starts to wonder if that means she's a bad person. We do get to see her go to therapy and kind of see the process of getting these thoughts under control and what that means for her. I definitely think this one warrants a trigger warning because a lot of these thoughts are probably violent and disturbing, and I do think that it deals a lot with experiencing that, and for a lot of people that can be very scary, so definitely look out for that. But this one sounds really good, and I think when people think of OCD, they think a lot about being very organized, hand washing, but one of the main things with OCD is very scary, intrusive thoughts as well, and they can be very violent and dark and gruesome. And it's something that's not talked about very much when it comes to that mental illness. So I'm actually really glad that this one has been written and is sharing some light on those unseen parts of the illness that not everyone sees or experiences or talks about. So I also am really glad that our protagonist is going to therapy and seeking help and hopefully destigmatizing that process as well. Next book I want to talk about is called Just by Looking at Him by Ryan O'Connell. I did not know this, but the author is the star in Queer as Folk on Peacock, which I did not know that. It is described as darkly witty, and we follow a TV writer who is gay and has cerebral palsy. Now, I know that this story does deal with a lot of internalized ableism, so if that's something that you're not comfortable reading, this might be one for you to skip. Our main character, Elliot, is dealing with a lot of issues where he wants to be seen as attractive. He's always been attractive. He's slept around with a lot of men, and now he's kind of dealing with the cerebral palsy in a very ableist world and dealing with a lot of his own internalized ableism. There are definitely moments of alcoholism involved, along with a lot of intercourse that is happening between him while he's cheating on his partner. So this book definitely probably won't be for everyone, but Elliot tries to overcome all of these things and come out the other side. So it's supposed to be very darkly witty, but it definitely handles some pretty deep and dark situations through the lens of not comedy, but taking kind of a lighter approach to it. And so it sounds like a lot of the prose and the protagonist's voice is going to be very funny, but we are going to be dealing with some pretty heavy subjects. So just look out for that. But I definitely think this one might be worth the read for the right reader. The next book I want to talk about is The First Thing About You by Chaz Hayden. And this is a YA contemporary story about a boy with muscular atrophy. One thing that I thought was really interesting about this is that he categorizes people by their favorite color. So when he asks someone, what's your favorite color? If they answer with green or blue or purple, he will choose not to be friends with them because he wants to surround himself with people who like yellow, orange, red, and other bright colors. And basically the story starts out where he moves with his family from California to New Jersey, and he wants to kind of reinvent himself and be seen as someone more than the boy who is in the powered wheelchair. He makes friends with a young nursing student, and she encourages him to ask out this girl that he likes. But as it turns out, she might be hiding things from him as well. So this definitely sounds very interesting. I love the color aspect of all of this, and I think it sounds like a really interesting and great read, so I'm definitely adding this one to my TBR. I have to read this next one off because it's kind of a long title. So the next book I want to talk about is The Many Half-Lived Lives of Sam Sylvester by Maya McGregor. Our main character is a non-binary teen named Sam, and they move to a town in Oregon with their father. And from what we understand, something really bad happened in the town that they lived in before, so they're kind of hoping for a fresh start. But Sam finds out from another kid in town that someone mysteriously died in the house that they live in with their dad 30 years earlier. So they decide to team up and try and solve the mystery of what happened. Eventually, they start getting some threatening messages and they know that they're getting close. This one is also marketed as kind of a found family, queer, super fun mystery. So I think that sounds awesome, and I definitely will be adding this one to my TBR. The next one I want to talk about is called The One Thing by Marcy Lynn, and this one has a blind protagonist. Our protagonist is named Maggie, and she lost her sight 6 months ago, and instead of, being very upset about it, she decides that she's not going to let this stop her. And she kind of formed a rebellious streak, resulting in a school prank gone wrong, and now she has a probation officer. She loses a lot of her friends and all these other things. And then one day she realizes she can see again, but she can only see one person, and it's a 10-year-old boy named Ben. And so we kind of discover why she can see Ben and what's going on with everything. I think it's really interesting to have a blind main character in a book because we have to rely on every sense outside of sight in order to kind of understand what's going on around her. So I'm very interested in reading this book, and I definitely think it's going to deal with the loss of something and learning to move past it and live on and live fully. So definitely one that sounds very interesting to me, and I can't wait to read it. Alright, so those are all the books that feature disabled characters that I'm going to talk about today in this video. I could probably do at least one more. There are lots of great books out there with disabled representation in them. I really hope that one of these books catches your interest and maybe you decide to pick one up. I will have a ton of resources down below and links to many, many, many more book recommendations. So if you were looking for representation that maybe wasn't mentioned in this video, it might be in one of those lists below. Thank you, as always, so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you again for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.